Hey, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening for some of you listening around the world. We're broadcasting from Kauai, Hawaii today, and I've got Barry Ellis with me. Just wanted to welcome everyone to the podcast, What's Up Enterprise, sponsored by Comerit, the most important 30 minutes of your business day. This is where we uncover the details of technology, data, and analytics impacting the global business climate. Anyhow, so we have a lot of topics, and I think this is very relevant what I see happening in the market today as I talk to different organizations and enterprises across the globe. Um, and Barry, you come from a very unique position. You're still currently on a very interesting project that actually incorporates a lot of these questions. And I'm just going to jump right in it since we have a 30-minute session.
Sounds good.
So I think one of the big areas that is a consistent thought that comes up with these leaders is that they're on or going to S4. Either they're post implementation or they're during their implementation of S4. And the big question is, what do I do about my analytics strategy? How does that change based upon going from my old EC system over to the new S4 analytics system? So, can we start there and lead us down a path and tell us a little bit about that?
Well, a lot of companies, as you know, Dave, that are running the classic SAP ECC as their ERP system, typically they have some sort of data warehouse that they offload that data to, like SAP BW is the classic scenario there. And that could be running on a native database or it could be running on HANA. It doesn't matter. But once you go to S4, now the function of performance that the BW environment provided is no longer required because S4HANA is quite a performant environment. So it can support both your running your ERP as well as your real-time analytics in the same environment. So that opens up an opportunity to run your operational analytics right out of S4HANA, which is great because it's always up to date and it can manage both quite well. But in terms of the front end tools that the most companies that are considering using on top of S4 is either using Fiori as the front end tool or using SAP Analytics Cloud as the front end. And some actually will use both depending on what the use cases actually happen to be. So if the question is, what do I do with all my SAP operational analytics, then in most cases you can get along quite well with running Fiori and SAC on top of your S4 HANA environment, and you don't necessarily have to have your BW providing that function any longer. So that's the general pattern that we see most folks trying to follow if they can. Now, unless they have BW as their enterprise data warehouse, which some companies actually do, which have a
Okay.
lot of other non-SAP data in there, then the question becomes a little bit more complex because now I was using BW for other things than just my SAP operational analytics. So now you've got some other fundamental based choices you have to make. Either you can stick with BW and that's totally fine, it works great, or you can decide to move off that platform and to go elsewhere. Consistently, we're finding companies that want to get off of BW but still want to have an enterprise data warehouse platform. They use Snowflake a lot, and that's quite a popular choice right now. So that's a good direction to go in as well.
I might want to come back around to some of the things that you already just mentioned, but in terms of analytics, I mean, it makes sense. The tools that are there that we see that SAP has, it seems like the likely choice. But often what I'm seeing are companies that run Salesforce, so they have a Tableau instance. Some are using Power BI. I mean, just a lot of different options depending on a lot of the data that's not SAP. It's not
Right.
part of the SAP transactional system. So what's really uh, is there a best practice? How do you approach this? And this is where I see the big question is because, quite honestly, and I think sales guys and me being one could be guilty of this, is we tend to push what we know, and
Right.
that may not always be the right option. So, what's the strategy? I mean, how do we deal with it?
Well, depending on the size of the organization, and we deal with some that are all over the place. That could be very small mom and pop organizations to Fortune 20 companies that you and I have worked with, Dave. It's not an attainable or realistic goal to try to narrow it down to one particular tool because, one particular tool like Tableau will integrate well with certain tools and may not with others. So I think really the best practice is within the cost objectives that you have with respect to controlling the cost for all
Yeah,
the
that's
licensing and all
important.
that kind of stuff
Right.
is if you can just get it down to just a couple that will meet 95% of all of your analytical needs, then you just try to pick two and stick with those if you can. The right way to approach that is to really have a great sense of what are all of the analytical use cases that are across your enterprise. We help companies actually do this. In fact, is we'll go in and canvas different pockets of the organization within the business and across IT and get an idea of not necessarily the use cases that they currently have delivered, but what are they looking to do into the future? Because a lot of those things that have been built along the way have been operationalized, and they probably, in many cases, are not even looking at that anymore. But what are they currently looking to deliver in the future that's aligned with their business strategy? All right. Identify all those use cases. And for each one of those use cases, try to get a sense of, is this something that needs to be a strong visualization? Do I need to be able to do slicing and dicing, drill down? What are the features of the tool that I need to have enabled by that tool? Can I import data in a custom fashion and manipulate it on my own? All those things you have to understand the breadth of the capabilities that you think the use cases may require, and then grade the tools that you're selecting based upon that criteria. So the ones that match up and cover all of those use case feature requirements, you just pick those. And also cost becomes a factor as well. And some of the tools that have been coming out that are a little bit more native cloud, are basically a no cost at all. If cost is your primary driver, then some of the other options that may not be your traditional analytics tool start to become really attractive.
So, what's the effort like to go through and do this analysis? Does it take 6 months to analyze the right direction? Is it a half a day workshop? Or if I'm the company, what am I expecting? Or maybe is it both? Do I start on a half day so I can plan? And I think that's a massive question out there. No one quite knows. And a lot of the clients I'm talking to are very curious about what that looks like.
The thing is, probably want to interview different levels of the organization. So it's always good to start with the executive layer and understanding their informational and analytical and insight
Mhm.
gaps. What is it about their business that they can't see right now, or have some sort of perspective on what they think that they need to have in order to uh, support the business strategy that the CEO and the board members are wanting them to follow, right? So start with the executive. That probably you can probably do that in about a week, and then go one level down the folks that support them in terms of who provides them the information and understand what their perspective happens to be. And you may just stop there. So I think it's probably a couple of weeks of information gathering in terms
Awesome.
of candidate use cases, rate them in
Mhm.
terms of what level of strategic alignment that they are, and weed out the ones that are just pain points. Because sometimes the fact that it's an informational need that one person takes them all day to do wouldn't necessarily be the right criteria. You're looking for use cases that have the biggest impact for the most users. So you try to be sensitive and understand the things that have the biggest influence on the features that you're going to try to qualify and map to a particular tool, either tool A or tool B or tool C, for example. So to answer your question, I think it's probably a couple of weeks of information gathering, and then you do a little bit of tool mapping and things like that. In some cases, you may ask the question and they say, well, I don't know what capabilities that I need, or I
Mm.
don't know.
Right.
You're asking about visualization and they don't even know what that means. So in some cases, you have to come back and say, well, this is the art of the possible. Do some demos and say, of these tools, did you know that you could do this? Did you know that you could do that? So sometimes they're answering the questions from the perspective of what they know. So you kind of have to give them,
Right.
in many senses, we start off with, before we ask those questions, is just, hey, do you know what the art of the possible is within, let's say, SAP Analytics Cloud, for example? And a lot of folks would, oh, I've never even heard of it. So we'll do a demo and show them what that
Wow.
looks like. And they go, oh, okay. And then they get the wheels start to spin a little bit and say, all right, you think about it. And we'll come back in a few days and then we'll talk about what you think the possibilities might be for you.
So there might be times during the couple of weeks or week or whatever where there's an opportunity to explore I know some organizations I spoke to, a lot of them just came off of a demo from SAP or from some other
Hmm.
vendor. So there's this old saying in consulting, with enough time and money, I can make anything happen. But
Right.
honestly, I mean, that's where I think they're getting tripped up. There's so many options. And when you see the demo, it all, this is just true with most software, it just always looks like it is the absolute right solution. So what you're saying though is we can take them through more in-depth Q&A process and really doing the mapping from what they've been shown to where they might actually go. So that's part of the
Well,
process.
if they've been shown something already, then you may not necessarily have to do a demo.
Got it.
Just right. They're already intrigued with. They may not have a full understanding of all the capabilities and the things that you can do with a particular tool set. So if they've already got that in hand, then you don't necessarily have to do that. But a lot of customers that we talk to have been using the same reporting tool for 10 years. And when you ask them about what their requirements are, they're thinking about, want to do the same thing I do now, but just in a different tool. So maybe it looks a little bit nicer and it's a little bit easier. I think the way you engage them is you need to challenge them about, well, what are you really going to do with the information? What
Right.
actions are you really going to take? In many cases, you're finding out that who you're talking to, they're just running it and handing it off to someone else who's looking at it and handing it to someone else. And you find that there's a sort of information handoff to a person, to a decision maker. And what you want to try to do is say, well, really, in the ideal situation, you're actually going to provide this capability directly to someone that's going to take action on that without it being handed off from one person to another where it actually makes a difference. So in many cases, we're actually finding that the tools are so good now that you don't necessarily have to have an accountant pull down data so that an analyst can run the report, package it up, and give it to a manager who's going to look at it and go, oh, this is a problem. I need to go take action on it. You want to put it directly in the hands of someone who's going to take action on that. So a lot of that discussion as well.
So, and those are tools that exist today that you're seeing. That's the possibility. What's the end game? This may be a multi-part question. So, number one, what's the end game? What could they be striving for? The client, when you get through all of this and you've implemented the tools, what can they expect? What can they look forward to after they get through this implementation? And then I want to wrap up on where are they evolving to?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So really, the name of the game is really trying to get, and this almost sounds cliche when I say it out loud, but it's really getting the right information to the right person in the right format
Right.
and doing it as easily as possible so that you automate as much as you can. So information is flowing, getting presented directly to the person in a way that is almost effortless. So instead of developing a report, so someone has to remember to log into a system, run the report, provide the parameters, then look at the output, think about what they're seeing. Does it make sense? Does it compel me to ask a question that I want to interact with it? Instead of
Right.
having to do all that, the ideal would be you have some sort of reporting object that runs on a regular basis that knows that if something is outside of a threshold, notify me somehow. Either ping me an alert that I can just look at directly, automate that process so that I don't have to remember to do anything on a regular basis. That information is chasing me. I'm not chasing that information. That's the ideal. And then if the alert is within tolerance, then you don't have to look at that KPI. Right. To me, that's the idea, is that the folks that are going to be taking action on the information that's being provided don't really have to exert any effort to look at the information and decide, do I need to make a phone call? Do I need to press an approval button? What do I need to do next? Right. It's in front of
Right.
me. It's basically chasing me, and I need to decide if I'm going to take action or not. Right. That's the
Yeah.
idea. That's the idea. It doesn't
It,
matter what tool you're talking about. It needs to be able to do that.
the funny thing, and I know you've probably heard me tell this story about when I first was introduced to SAP. I thought that's exactly what the system did. It's like, yeah, no problem. You're the CEO, CFO, you're a line vice president, or you're someone who has to take action. This is in 98. I'm like, yeah, you
Right.
just go there, you look at your dashboard, and you ask a question and you click a button and it should tell you exactly what you need to do next. That was the vision that I had. And that's why I was really excited for people who were purchasing licenses then and then had this goal, we're going to implement it, and they were working with me. That's where I thought we were. And I realized now today, this is what you're saying. It's like we can really now take a look at something that's within business context. You gather insights from all this data, right?
Right.
And so that at the end of the day, it's a simple, like real simple description of the action
Right.
that you can take. Before I forget, I know there are people out there listening and you might have questions or want us to go even deeper on some of this stuff. And I agree, there's a lot to unpack here. And I think the opportunity right now in the world is quite incredible. We haven't even started to talk about how these insights and actions get taken using artificial intelligence. And we will. We're going to get to that. I think that's an exciting topic. But if you have questions, definitely reach out. You can put comments right inside of the notes wherever you might be viewing this from. So, Barry, going to the last question, we've got about 10 minutes left here. And I think we started to talk about this. So, where do we end up? Well, clients will have all sorts of brands and tools that they're working with, or where does this end?
Well, I hate to tell you this, Dave, but there is no end.
Okay.
Okay.
Well,
Because there's always a better way to do it, right?
Right.
It's ever evolving. The technology's
Sure.
evolving. Let me tell you where we've been just recently. So
Okay.
even like 10
Yeah.
years ago when
Sure.
HANA first came out, the response times for analytics became a lot more conversational, but they had been in other tools as well using other techniques. But for SAP, that was really a moment when that technology became available for analytics purposes. And so couple that with the consumer expectations of like someone who started using Google to do search and just the millions of potential answers, and they could go and do some research. And so the internet experience and the instant response time, that the expectation on analytics tools started to become there. So it was a real consumer pressure on SAP and other tool manufacturers to come up with a way that it could be a little bit more conversational, right? What I see coming is a lot more orientation to a response to the way that folks are starting to embrace things like ChatGPT, where it's a little bit more of a chat.
I was gonna take you there. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
no,
I have questions. It's
yeah.
exactly
I may not have answers, Dave, but I see that's going to be, and I think SAP tried to get in front of this because they've had natural language processing capabilities within
NLP.
SAC for a
Correct.
while, right?
Right.
Now, there have been limitations on what a user can actually question. The data has to be resident in the SEC tool. It can't be a remote connection. So I think SAP will, hopefully they're listening. If hopefully they'll start to open that up to other
Yeah.
platforms, like anything that's running in HANA, anything that's in Databricks Cloud. They should open up that capability. Show me the top 10 revenue earning customers in this region. The data should be beyond just what's stored in the SAC platform, right? So I see a lot more interactivity with that, and maybe even starting to respond in a way that tell me the most important things I need to respond to in my area.
Right.
It will know me as Barry.
Right.
I'm
Because you're
the
the
I'm the regional
CEO
manager
or
for
something.
yeah,
Right.
right.
Exactly.
It will know who I am and automatically translate that into
Yeah.
filter criteria that narrows down the scope of the analysis and produce a response. It'll become almost like a chat
Yeah.
interaction with
Right.
your analytics tool. I think that'd be ideal.
So that's exactly what I was hoping you'd go into. And I know we don't have all the answers, but just knowing like common people that don't even know what SAP is at the moment, but they're very familiar with what Bing AI is doing or
Right.
what Chat GPT is doing. And I've actually watched some podcasts and people go live and have very interesting conversations, just like, natural language processing conversations where they're like, okay, pretend I'm the CFO of this and here's what's going on. Or based on what you know of my system, all the transactions, what should be my next logical step? Where should I travel? We should technically be able to get there, right? What you're seeing, ideally, like you said, if the teams, the developers out there in SAP land I'm sure somebody's thinking through this and probably already testing.
Right.
but it seems like
It
a natural progression.
Yeah, like in Teams, for example, I think what they're starting to enable is once you're done with your Teams meeting, it runs analysis of who said what and comes up with a summary of these are the key
Wow.
topics, these are the next steps. And I think what will come up with that is, in addition to that, is well, here's the next step. Maybe there's an analysis that needs to be done to actually accomplish that next step. Like basically, the next step could be determine what my top sales customers are for this region. And
Yeah.
so hopefully it will go, oh, I know how to do that. I'm going to run that analysis before you, and I'll put a hyperlink in there, and just in case you want to delve into that. So it become a really deep assistant and understanding within the context of you doing business with your colleagues, customers, and so forth. It will be sensitive to, hey, here is a need for information that I know that I can get because I've got
Yeah.
it within my environment. Go do that and
Right.
provide a link to the results or say, hey, I've got this ready for you. So without
Yeah.
you having to ask, right? It's sensitive to, I might need to go and do some research and provide that without you even asking for it.
That's cool. I mean, that's the ultimate, right? It's really like giving an executive that ability to, head out to the island, sit on the beach, and have a little chat with his enterprise chat bot and have these questions so that, hey, I'm going to be at the beach today, but I would really like to make sure that there's nothing I need to do at the moment. That's kind of the way I see the features. I still believe this is where human intelligence is very helpful and intuitive leaping, right? So the computer can take real live data. And this is probably another topic we can talk about, but intuitive leaping, which is what humans can do, that feedback that they can get from all the transactional data. And then as an executive, because you've got this intuition, you've got all this skill set, you can apply that and then send the AI off to, hey, okay, that sounds good. Why don't you go back and try this and then send these reports and see what their thoughts are as I go back out and surf. So I'm vision boarding even in general. I always envisioned that was really where the world was headed. And yeah,
So I
it's
see an extension of ChatGPT is based upon all of the information that's available on the web. Well, not everything, but the certain specific curated
right.
sources, right? So being able to bring that capability based upon all the data that's available in your enterprise and those that even relate and tangentially that's not inside your enterprise, but also is publicly available,
Right.
it would, in an automated way, know how to integrate those two things together because I know my customer is in this state, right?
Right.
If this state is in my organizational region, but that state's other publicly available information might be relevant. So I can also include some of that information as well, draw some insights. I go, hey, by the way, did you know that as a result of in next year, there's going to be a new corridor open in a new freeway is going to open up in this city,
Exactly.
right? And
Yeah,
we know that there's going to
exactly.
be a different kind of flow happening, and you've got an opportunity to open a store here or open a store there, or you might need to consider closing one. Those kind of things start to become magical when
Yeah.
someone taps you on the shoulder and says, I found this information for you. You might want to check it out.
Right. No, that's awesome. That's exactly what's up enterprise. You start thinking like that. Caitlin, I know Caitlin's back there running things in the background. We're gonna have to actually run this podcast through and see, hey, what areas, break it down. There was a lot of good questions and answers there. And I know as we're wrapping up here, I think there's probably people out there that would love to be inside of this chat even and really kind of explore a little bit more in depth this conversation. And it's exactly why I want to have these podcasts because things are moving quickly and there's lots of opportunity. And I think the beauty of it is having people like you, Barry, on the team is really helping us to achieve that. It's out there helping a number of organizations think through these things so that we can make it possible. Well, listen, I wanted to thank you for your time. And I'm really looking forward to our next chat and we'll dive a little deeper in there. I'd like to do a poll if we can. And Caitlin, see if we can get people to see like where they would like us to explore even further. But even just talking about this stuff, it's really exciting. And like I said, I really appreciate you taking out the
It
time,
was a lot
Barry.
of fun, Dave.
So, all right. Well, everyone, hope to see you on our next show next Tuesday at 3 Pacific Standard Time.